Nobody understood how Margot's car ended up in this lake in the middle of the forest. But it quickly became clear that whoever dumped it here did not want it to be found again. The whole situation was shrouded in mystery right up until the trunk of the car was opened. Then it suddenly became clear to everybody what had happened here. It was a discovery that still has Margot spooked until this very day. Margot felt like she was on shaky legs as her car was being pulled out of the lake. It looked like it had not been in here for very long, but it had been gone for at least 2 months at this point. Where the hell could it have been in the meantime? Margot would find out the disturbing truth very soon when she started to look through the car. When the police opened up the trunk of the car and Margot saw what was inside, she nearly collapsed onto her knees while the police all jumped back in shock. Tears are starting to pour down Margot's cheeks as all attention quickly shifts to her. But who had stolen Margot's car? How had it ended up in the lake? And what did they find in the trunk? But before we start to smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. It was a typical Monday morning when Margot got this unexpected phone call from the police. They announced to her that they found her stolen car nearby the forest lake. The truth is that she didn't expect to see her car ever again. It was 2 whole months without any news. She felt happy and relieved because at this time, she could not afford to buy a new one. The day that these people stole her car was hard for her. At the station, they reported her car stolen, and the police informed her that this was something that apparently happened a lot recently. Margot hoped that this meant they would know how to help her, but this was not the actual truth. As it seemed, they were not able to do much. Almost none of the cars that had been stolen in this manner had been recovered yet, so the odds to find Margot's car were not good at all. They had no idea yet who were those people or why they stole cars all this time. The police were shocked by the case, but they promised to add Margot's car details to the list with the other stolen cars, so they were going to keep an eye out for it. At this point, Margot still had a bit of hope, but as the days were passing by, her hopes slowly faded. The days turned into months, and Margot had nearly forgotten about her stolen car when she received a surprising call. It was an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. He had seen her Facebook post about the car and had stumbled upon it during one of his walks. Margot was thrilled at the news, but was quickly disheartened when he revealed that the car was submerged in the middle of a lake in the local forest. Confused and concerned, Margot contacted the police. She hoped this discovery would provide a crucial lead in their investigation of the missing cars. The police were intrigued but skeptical about how the car ended up in the lake. Nonetheless, they mobilized to check the scene, with Margot and her friend accompanying them. Reaching the lake was a challenge due to the rugged terrain, and even the tow truck had difficulty navigating. Margot's friend and his dog waited by the lake while the police assessed the situation. One officer suited up to dive into the lake and examine the car. He noticed scratches along its exterior, suggesting the car had been hastily driven through the forest. This was puzzling, as no damaged trees were visible on their path to the lake. While waiting for the tow truck, another officer discovered a secondary, heavily marked path leading deeper into the forest. It raised further questions about the thief's intentions and why the car ended up in such a secluded location. The arrival of the tow truck shifted the focus to retrieving the vehicle. Once the car was hauled ashore, the officers were relieved to find it had not been in the water long and wasn't completely flooded. The police immediately began dusting for fingerprints and inspecting the car for clues. As one officer examined the interior, another struggled to open the trunk. Margot's key no longer worked, likely due to the car's damage. Determined, the officer resorted to using a crowbar. He ended up using a crowbar, and after a few attempts, he managed to fully pop open the trunk, realizing its very surprising contents. Margot's was the first one to see it. Her mouth fell open, and she fell on her knees. What did she see? The officer put on gloves before he dared to touch anything in the trunk of the car, and only when he laid it all out on the ground did they get an idea of the full scale of what they found. Even the officers were very surprised with what they had found, they tried calming Margot. In the trunk were bags full of water-damaged money and substances that would probably have been sold to make this kind of money. This could be one of the biggest local busts in recent memory. They certainly hadn't seen anything like this before. But why was the car dumped in the water? Now all the officers wanted to do was follow the apparent route this car had come from to find out where it had come from with all of this. They made their way through the narrow path till they eventually reached a small shed far away from civilization. And some of the cars that had recently been stolen were parked outside of it. They had probably found their thief. Who was it? When they busted in the door, it became clear that nobody was there anymore. And by the looks of this, they had made a good effort to erase all their tracks. Maybe they already feared that the police were on their trail. They started to check for little traces. But as it would turn out, they missed a lot of details when making their getaway, and the police managed to collect a lot of fingerprints and even DNA samples from the shed and the cars. Now they got them, they knew they were going to find whoever was responsible, sooner than they thought. This quickly led to a few arrests, and in time, also to an explanation for what had exactly been going on here. Apparently, the shed was an illegal production lab and also a base of operation for the local supplier and his crew of dealers. They stole cars that the dealer used to transport the money and product all the way through the forest. They had switch points on the outskirts of the woods where they would get in their own undamaged cars and they would sell out of those. This was the biggest bust of the century. The supplier felt secure in his forest shed, but when one of his dealers got arrested recently, he got cold feet. This is why Margaret's car got driven in the lake. They thought they erased the traces. Afraid that he would be ratted out, he decided to pack up everything and make a run for it. He tried to destroy all the evidence, which also included dumping a car with supplies in the lake. But in his haste, he had forgotten that there was also still money in there. That was the crucial mistake. The first arrest made in this case led to a chain reaction, at the end of which everybody involved was going to get their day in court. Margaret and the friend also got a handsome reward for their part in getting these people arrested. Margaret could buy a new car, and she honored for her part in all of this. Tell us what you think about this story and share it with your friends. It might inspire them and brighten their day.